My mother-in-law was standing in my bedroom when I came home. She was folding my clothes into boxes as if she had lived there for years. My husband was standing behind her. He was holding a set of keys I had never seen before. Then he looked at me and said, "Mom is moving in, and after the divorce the house stays with her." I stared at him. I was waiting for him to laugh and tell me it was some horrible joke. He did not. Lorraine kept folding my clothes. She did not even look embarrassed. Graham looked at me and said, "You should have thought about that before you decided to leave me." There was only one problem with what he had just said. I had never told Graham I wanted a divorce, and they had forgotten one very important detail. I had already discovered exactly what they had been planning behind my back. Before I tell you what I discovered, let me ask you something. If your husband suddenly told you that the home you had spent years paying for was no longer yours, would you fight for it or walk away? Keep that answer in mind, because what I discovered next changed everything. I am Audrey. I am 35 years old, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. Graham and I had been married for 9 years. When we first met, he was working long hours for a small construction company. I was managing a dental office. We were not wealthy, but we were careful with money. When we decided to buy our first house, I put almost all of my savings toward the down payment. Graham contributed too, but my income covered most of the mortgage afterward. We chose the house together. We painted the walls together. We spent weekends arguing over furniture and laughing about how neither of us could agree on where the television should go. It was supposed to be our dream home, but Graham's mother Lorraine never liked it. She thought we should have bought something closer to her neighborhood. She constantly complained that Graham had moved too far away from her. I tried to be patient. Lorraine was widowed, and Graham always told me she had become more difficult after his father died. So when she needed help, I helped her. When she needed groceries, I ordered them. When she called Graham late at night because she was lonely, I told him to go see her. I never imagined that she was waiting for the moment she could move into my home. The first sign was small. Graham suddenly became interested in our mortgage. He started asking exactly how much I had saved. He wanted to know whether my name was on every account. When I asked why, he said he was simply trying to organize our finances. Then one Saturday I came home and found Lorraine measuring the upstairs hallway. I laughed because I thought she was joking. She looked at me and said, "I'm thinking about where I will put my things." I looked at Graham. He would not look at me. That night I asked him what she meant. He told me his mother might need to stay with us temporarily because her health was getting worse. I agreed that we could discuss it, but 2 weeks later Lorraine arrived with 3 moving boxes. I asked Graham whether we had actually agreed to this. He told me I was being dramatic. Then he said, "She is family." I asked why I was finding out after the decision had already been made. He walked away. The next morning I found a folder sitting on the kitchen counter. Graham had left it there by accident. Inside were papers about refinancing the house. There was information about changing ownership. There were also notes about adding Lorraine to documents connected to the property. I confronted him. He told me I was misunderstanding everything. Then he said something that made my stomach turn. "If something happens between us, Mom needs somewhere to live." Something between us. We had been married for 9 years. Why was my husband planning for the end of our marriage while pretending everything was normal? I did not argue with him again. Instead, I quietly started checking our financial records. That was when I found the first secret. Graham had taken out several personal loans during the previous 2 years. I knew nothing about them. Payments were being made from an account I believed was being used for household expenses. I kept looking. Then I found transfers to Lorraine. Thousands of dollars, month after month. I asked Graham about the money. He finally admitted he had been helping his mother, but the numbers did not make sense. He had not simply been helping her. He had been paying debts she had accumulated after taking out loans in her own name, and he had been hiding the situation because he was afraid I would stop him. I thought that was the whole betrayal. It was not. A few days later I received an email from our mortgage company asking me to confirm a recent request concerning the house. I had never made that request. I called immediately. The representative told me someone had submitted documents claiming that I had agreed to transfer my interest in the property. I asked for copies. When they arrived, I recognized Graham's signature. There was another signature too. Lorraine. They had been preparing to make it look as though I had voluntarily agreed to give up my share of the house. That night I confronted Graham. He finally stopped pretending. He told me he had been planning everything for months. He intended to convince me to sign the papers during what he called a financial restructuring. Then he would move Lorraine Lorraine into the house. Eventually, he would tell me the marriage was over. I asked him why he needed to take the house too. His answer destroyed whatever love I had left for him. Because you would not leave with nothing. I stared at him. He said he believed I would take the house, the savings, and half of everything if we divorced. So he had decided to make sure there was as little left as possible before I knew the marriage was ending. Then Lorraine walked into the room. She had heard everything. I asked her if she had known. She did not even hesitate. Yes. I asked her how she could do this to me after everything I had done for her. She looked at me and said, "You have always had more than Graham. It was time for someone else to have a chance." That was the moment something inside me went completely quiet. I was not fighting for the house anymore. I was fighting to make sure neither of them could rewrite what had happened. I did not scream. I did not threaten them. I told Graham I needed time to think. He thought I was finally accepting reality. He had no idea I had already contacted an attorney and started documenting everything. Over the next week I collected the bank records. I collected the loan statements. I collected the ownership documents. I collected the messages between Graham and Lorraine. I also documented every conversation about the house. Then we found something neither of them expected. Some of the money Graham had been sending to Lorraine had not gone toward her debts at all. It had been used to purchase a small property in her name. Graham had been preparing a second financial safety net for himself while using money from our joint accounts. He had been planning for a life after me while making me pay for it. That was when I understood how calculated this had been. He was not simply leaving. He was trying to leave with the life I had helped build. But there was another part of his plan I had not discovered yet. Graham had been telling Lorraine that I was financially irresponsible. He told her I was obsessed with money. He told her that if we ever divorced, I would take everything from him. He had convinced her that he was protecting himself from me. Lorraine believed him so completely that she thought taking my home was justified. She had been helping him destroy my reputation inside my own family while I was still trying to protect hers. I decided not to tell them everything I knew. I wanted them to believe their plan was still working. Graham continued acting normal. Lorraine continued behaving as though she already owned the house. Then one evening Graham told me he had prepared the final paperwork. He wanted me to sign it the following morning. He said it would make everything easier. I smiled and told him I would look at it. He had no idea I had already seen those documents. The next morning he and Lorraine were waiting in the living room. Graham placed the papers on the table. He said, "This is the easiest way for everyone to move forward." I looked at the papers. Then I looked at both of them. I said, "I know everything, Graham." He froze. Lorraine's face changed. I put the bank records on the table. Then the loan statements. Then the property records. Then copies of the messages between them. Graham reached for the papers. I moved them away. I told him exactly what I had discovered. The hidden loans. The transfers to Lorraine. The attempt to make it appear that I had voluntarily surrendered my interest in the house. The property purchased with money from our joint accounts. The conversations about what would happen to me after the divorce. Lorraine started crying. She turned to Graham and asked, "You told me she was the problem." Graham could not answer. Then she asked him, "You told me she was going to destroy you." Still nothing. I looked at Lorraine and said, "He needed you to believe I was the villain because you would never help him betray me if you knew the truth." Graham finally raised his voice. He said I had misunderstood everything. He said he had only been trying to protect himself. I asked him one question. Protect yourself from what? He had no answer. I told him that if he wanted a divorce, he could have asked for one. If he wanted his mother to live somewhere else, he could have discussed it with me. If he had financial problems, he could have told me. Instead, he spent 2 years building a secret plan to make me leave with nothing. That was not protection. That was betrayal. I filed for divorce. The financial records were examined. The money transferred to Lorraine was traced. The property purchased with marital funds became part of the financial dispute. The attempted transfer of my home became evidence of what Graham had been planning. He had believed that because I was his wife, he could make me doubt myself long enough to take control of everything. He was wrong. Lorraine eventually moved out. The house she had been measuring rooms for was never hers. The property she thought Graham was secretly building for their future became part of the financial mess he had created. Graham lost the control he thought he had. But the most satisfying moment happened months later. Graham asked to meet me at the house. I agreed. Lorraine came with him. She stood in the doorway and looked around the living room. Then she started crying. She said she had imagined herself living there. I looked at her and said, "You did did. You just never imagined that I would still be standing here." Graham asked whether there was any chance we could work things out. I told him there was. He looked surprised. Then I said, "You can work out your life without me." He looked down at the floor. For the first time since I had known him, he had nothing left to manipulate. I had spent months believing that losing my marriage would destroy me. Instead, losing the illusion of my marriage gave me back my life. Graham had believed the house was something he could take from me before I knew what was happening. Lorraine had believed being family gave her the right to claim what I had built. They were both wrong. The house mattered, but it was not the greatest thing I saved. I saved myself from spending another decade convincing myself that betrayal was normal just because it came from people I loved. For years, whenever something felt wrong, I convinced myself I was imagining it. Graham told me I was paranoid. Lorraine told me I was too suspicious. They wanted me to doubt my own instincts because someone who doubts herself is much easier to control. I will never do that again. A few weeks before the divorce was finalized, I found one final message between Graham and Lorraine. It had been sent months before I knew anything. Graham had written, "Once she is out, everything will finally be ours." I read that sentence several times. Not mine, not our home, not our marriage. Everything would finally be theirs. That sentence told me everything I needed to know. I had spent 9 years building a home with a man who had already decided I did not belong in its future. So I stopped fighting to be included in his future. I started building one of my own. I changed the locks. I redecorated the room Lorraine had planned to use. I started traveling again. I reconnected with friends I had slowly lost touch with during the marriage. Most importantly, I stopped explaining myself to people who had already decided to misunderstand me. Sometimes the person who betrays you does not destroy your life all at once. They quietly make plans for a future where you no longer have a place. And sometimes the greatest revenge is not taking something from them. It is discovering that you were never powerless in the first place. If you were Audrey, what would you have done after discovering that your own husband and mother-in-law had been planning to take your home behind your back? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to Stories with Hazel. Thank you.